This is IBM Museum. I think we're ready to proceed with the NCR system. And in this case, this is the 3220 system that I didn't show the insides for before. And that is what I will be doing on this video. We will be opening it up. I'll be bringing up the SkyCam, just moving that webcam picture. I did promise I would turn down the sound, which I forgot to do, but I'm covering that now. So that should come in a little bit better for you guys, even though I realize you could just turn down your speakers or whatever. But hopefully I won't be seeming so overbearing now. And we still have to rely a little bit on the a grainy picture from the webcam, and I just need to get a 1080p device that I can get HDMI output out of, and autofocuses and is able to be maybe even controlled from my phone or something like that. If anybody has knows a good device, let me know, and certainly I can try that with my regular digital camera, Olympus TG6. I mean, I'm able to get real good high resolution photos out of it, and I use that for taking all my macro photos too, but that means I have to edit a video when I produce it, and I'm just in some of these cases, if I'm going a little bit too high speed, let me know, to calm down. And I'm just trying to get at least one video up per day, just so I can kind of work through a little bit of what I see as the backlog for some video content. But let's get underway on this one, and I will be pausing and readjusting things at some points as I go through and work with the system, and also looking at getting that screen capture going. Hopefully that we're able to run that NCR reference diskette. I think I have the appropriate one in this instance as well. So let me get all that set up, and I'll be right back with you. Okay, and before we go into the SkyCam view, I've got the Dallas module and the little battery holder on a lead. We've got fresh CR2032 battery for it. I've got what I made the reference diskette to be. Yes, I should get a label on this and identify what it is eventually. But I thought I'd stay on the back view as we get it opened up. 3 screws. And I was surprised these screws are not the same length. There are 2 that are a little bit shorter, and I think it's a little bit finer thread than what is typically on a clone, like a clone system. I need to know what the thread pitch is for those screws right off the top of my head, and I don't. But the center one here, I'm taking out the sides. These 2 sides, they're a little bit shorter screws, and the center one is a little bit longer. And I think that's for when you get the cover back on, the center screw has a longer reach just to pull that metal case top back. So then you can fasten the side screws. And it's a good heavy duty, think of which way I'm pulling here. Good heavy duty case with a lock on the side. I mean, maybe comparable to a Model 30, a little bit shorter case, but the key lock kind of in the same position and about the same dimensions as we'll see in the SkyCam picture once I get that set up. Okay, I'm pretty well centered here, pretty good position otherwise. course, I'm leashed in with my wired headset, but it's better audio that way, and I might keep the wireless headset for occasions like this to get a little bit more unleashed, but those clip the sound. So here's the interior view, and kind of some interesting things. I'll expose probably a little bit more with this, with removing this drive carrier as well. And you know, you have the two microchannel adapter slots that are over the top here. The lower one has got that AVE extension, and the one that I counted and made sure that it was kind of a standard size for the small. But and then the upper one's just standard 16-bit microchannel, not a 32-bit. We'll kind of see the reference of that later on. The other microchannel adapter would be below this drive cage, as we'll kind of see once we get to the point of removing it. And then and there might even be some mounting constraints in there as well. We do have the planar video and 4 VRAM chips. So this is probably, and I know that they have driver diskette for this video. So probably pretty good video. And this is probably a keyboard controller. This is it's marked VGA BIOS with a separate label, but probably system BIOS and VGA BIOS all in the same 40-pin EEPROM for that. We do have 30-pin SIMs. Looks like a pretty standard arrangement, and I believe that these are 4 megabyte apiece. So I believe I have this at 16 megabytes of system memory, but we will see. That's the only thing that I was thinking when I worked with this system. I can't remember how I received it, but I think I may have been on the lookout for the 4 megabyte SIMs, 4 of them, to put in here to gain that quantity. As pointed out earlier, and we have the adapter guide for that portion. We can see an Intel Overdrive CPU, and might even have some relative cache memory or something else. I don't know if those are, I'd have to look at that up close to see what those are labeled as. But I may have gone through and I may have added that CPU as well. I typically have pretty good capabilities of, at the time of those 46 chips that I was able to get pretty low. And I do want people to notice, for at least this view so far, there is a separation between that PCB that CPU is on and this main part of the planar. And I'm trying to see for just what's really shown in this grainy video from the webcam. There's a little bit of evidence there, but we'll see that a little bit more as we expose the drive cage, or pull that drive cage out of there, the drive carrier. Here is the power supply, still very much like a Model 50, nice and shiny. I hope we don't have any problems in powering that on, but very small. And there's actually a kind of a push rod assembly from the front button to put that, and it's got some kind of elasticized, that rubber coating on it, like you sometimes see on tools, for that metal rod that goes into just some linkage for turning on the power supply. Now we can see connections for the diskette drive and SCSI CD-ROM. This is another system that has that SCSI interface built into the system. It's not very visible on for just that grainy webcam picture, but these are plastic clips, and they do have an arrow on them that points the direction towards the front. And it's not really an arrow guiding on how they can be slid. I think it's just a marker of pointing towards the front of the machine. Being very careful with brittle plastic these days. We're going to lift those out of the way. They have a pin, but otherwise they're relatively symmetric. That pin's a little bit off center. That's probably why it has the arrow. And I don't know if the lighting and all the graininess that arrow is probably not visible at all. We'll set those aside. And it looks like maybe a trick to those is rotating them off away from the drive carrier, rolling them kind of that way. And then these metal carriers have where they slide in place. And here is from the diskette drive. And I can probably go through and I can disconnect power. And that's a very conventional diskette drive. Kind of rotate that up and away. And then Hewlett-Packard flexible diskette or flexible disk drive, manufactured to Hewlett-Packard standards. And so that's a Hewlett-Packard drive that's on an NCR system with microchannel that IBM originated. And of course, NCR had other machines. They had a Vessel Local Bus machine that I've got. They did other than microchannel. We'll set that off to the side. We see a little bit more. We see the power leads, going to that planar from the power supply here, and connections for all the LEDs and everything else up front. We're not going through and pulling out any planars or anything like that. Might be good for pictures at some point, but I'll just have to decide how I do that. How I pull a rail out to kind of expose that a little bit more. And we see here that it's actually got a quad flat plastic quad flat pack, or PF. I'm going to stumble on acronyms, I guess. It's late enough in the evening for me. But it's a plastic quad flat pack package for that chip. And at least I'll get that right, because I had said that on the 486 SLC 2 and SLC3 and the SX even, 386 SX. I called those PLCC, plastic leaded chip carrier, and I was corrected later on to say, hey, you were wrong in that. That is a plastic quad flat pack chip. This overdrive CPU is a PGA, pin grid array. But we can see that is on a CPU card. And of course, it doesn't have any power running directly to that CPU card. Just has it running to the planar and the drives. Interesting that it has even a drive cable there that's hooked in behind the adapter support guide for some reason. And I mean, that could bring up ideas of putting in SCSI 2 SD, solid state drive or something like that, even those are often powered by the SCSI bus like the system has, but you've got a power connector going up to the front of the system for that instance of that. It's not very evident in that in this orientation. This actually has a little fan hanger off of this brace, and I'm only undoing this just basically to show it. I'll not disconnect it or anything else like that. But it's the only fan that I really see on the system. The power supply, I've looked on all the edges. It doesn't seem like it has a fan. I don't know if it has internal fans on this to kind of cool it. It's got ventilation slots and everything else. But this is the only fan that I see at all on the system. And that's just a little very small. I mean, that's almost like a 40 millimeter, and that's not very thick at all. These things typically, if you have them so they move in the air at all, they make so much noise when they do it. And make sure that I get that back on there correctly. It clips in. A little screw. But the only fan that I see on that unit, even for it having an overdrive CPU, and I think that's even 100. Let me read what that is. Of course, the 46SX CPU has no heat sink on it. But that is and it's an S spec of SZ957, and it's marked version 1.1. And that is a DX4 ODP 100. So an overdrive processor with the extra pin, undoubtedly, on the underside. And it's got a built-in voltage regulators and everything else. But that is that CPU with just a rather large heat sink, comparably, but not any fan to it. So I had to figure out if I or whoever put that in really kind of thought out that process. And I don't think I'm going to disconnect the SCSI drive, but it's on a tray that takes it, rises above, just to give space for that microchannel slot. And it's just a regular microchannel slot size underneath. And that, and it's up above a little bit of the, and it actually has a cable tie on the top of that Dallas module. And there are even chip positions on the planar that are not otherwise populated for something. Very large flat plastic quad flat pack chip here. It's not the CPU, like a integrated chipset. It's a lot of leads on that thing. And some of the SCSI interface chips there that I recognize. Of course, I'll have to, I just want to, for video purposes, I just want to read those out loud since they're normally covered up. And I'm trying to look for, yeah, so that's an NCR 53C90 chip of the SCSI interface. Huh. And there's even some sort of Intel okay, I wonder if that is like the SCSI interface controller maybe or something else. That's actually, oh, that's the diskette. That's the diskette controller, probably like an 82078. So that even supports the 2.88 megabyte format in some conditions, whether NCR actually had a diskette drive that connected up in the conventional way to match the IBM models. But that's a diskette controller. That was a little bit strange when I saw an Intel copyright in this. And so this is actually held in to the socket by that cable tie. So I do want to pull that out, and really, I mean, you don't necessarily have to have a cable tie to hold those things in, but then note the orientation. Pin 1 is that way on the face. So the replacement would go in like this, and I'll probably just even run this battery carrier, and I haven't put any electrical tape or anything else like that, but I've got some on hand. Probably run over here to where I don't have to necessarily pull the drive carrier to change the clock battery. And I want to make sure when I pull this that it's a standard. And just rock these from side to side. These, the pins, over time, they kind of the electrical contacts that they make kind of start bonding these things, the seal that you've got to break free. And that's a standard DS 1287. Date code of, I'm always caught without my glasses here. Date code of 1993-06. So early on in 1993. Even though we didn't try, we can be relatively assured that Dallas module is likely expired internal battery. I'll save that for modifying later, and it'll be put in another system with an external battery, and make sure all my pins are aligned, kind of straight for going in that socket. And I just want to get on reading glasses again, just to make sure that I'm getting that in the right position. And like I say, I can do, in fact, that'll kind of keep it out of the way. I don't, and for running the reference diskette, I don't have any adapters in here right now. So the basic reference diskette, as long as I got the right one, and the NCR models are kind of confusing in that regard. But it should run that reference diskette for me. For no additional adapters put in place, of microchannel adapters that would need ADFs, and I didn't even look. And I'll actually document with once I do the other NCR system that looked like the Model 50. I'll actually document, because that reference diskette process is a little bit different than IBM's, of course. And I just want to make sure that doesn't, I'll probably get a little bit of some electrical tape. Just to make sure that it doesn't contact that upper lid. And later on I'll come up with a better position that's out of the way of any adapter or anything else like that. But I wanted to get it to where it was out from under that drive carrier at the very minimum, because it doesn't have a whole bunch of stick to it for that length. I'm going to have to get, this feels kind of harder than normal electrical tape. I may have to get a roll that feels, this doesn't feel right. It feels like it's a little bit old. I don't know if that has a date code on it. Oh, decorate and repair tape. So that's not even electrical tape at all. I need to look inside at that label. And this has a UL listing on the inside. Feels a lot more like electrical tape. And I think that'll have a little bit more stick to it just to cover those pins, exposed pins. And it may not look like much, but okay, so we didn't disconnect anything to the SCSI drive. We did disconnect power. Get that so it's not looped around quite so much. Power and the data connection of the diskette drive. I need to hurry up if this is not going to be I don't want this to be a super long video. We haven't even started to run that reference diskette yet. Okay, so the connections are made before I swing that down. That data cable. And of course you want to check alignments. And that looks like a factory notch, but the pin on this edge is actually has a notch in it. It's that doesn't look like anything that has been done after or moving that. It doesn't move around the case, and it hasn't come up against sharp corners, I don't think. I think it was designed that way. But that's interesting and probably not very visible on the camera there. But that's interesting. Now, I really hope that this thing will run a reference diskette. And then so now I have to see arrows as I go through and put these clips back in place, and the two clips look identical. I'm doing the same thing, rotating them from the one side to the other appears to be the trick to release and fasten them. And those are back in place. I don't necessarily think that I'm going to put a cover on this, and I don't want to cover up the positive marking for that coin cell to get it in the right direction. Just have that hanging there. And then, so I'm going to turn this around just to get it all connected up. And I'll have to, I may have to chase down some keyboard. No, that's not it. Some keyboard and mouse. Okay. I think that was an old expired coin cell that I just dropped on the ground. Of course, I don't really like doing the no-look connection, especially for the PS2 with those little pins in there. I have a K on that connection, but there's those iconized connectors again. So we have to have keyboard. We'll connect up mouse just because we can. And I will actually do mouse cable's a little bit trapped for the extension I have. Tangling up with my headset lead. That's fine. I've got M on that connector, that extension. Since it's not different from by appearance from the keyboard. Okay, and we will do our video capture. Adapter, and I should have untangled all my cords to be a better prep for the video, but I didn't. I was kind of rushing around today, and that would be trapped, wouldn't it? Okay. Boy, who knew today would be exercise 2. Stretching, bending. Okay. Just make sure we get that connection on. We're going to make sure we look. Okay, we don't need to spin those too tight. And lastly, power. Okay. Diskette in the drive. Hopefully that diskette drive works. And we probably need to switch over to a video capture and get me up on the screen here. Okay, and let me power it on. You hear all the... I'm hearing a buzzer. That did some sounds. Got a power light. Came on. Okay. Powered off. Powered back on. 1 buzz, 2 buzz, 3 buzz. So 3 long, 2 short is what it sounded like to me. And I didn't hear any pops. I didn't. The SCSI hard drive sounds like it's powered up correctly. I'm not hearing any unusual noises otherwise. Just not any video. And I wonder, it had this little volume control, and the sounds I'm hearing weren't all that loud, but that potentiometer, just trying to get that turned up, because I have the case cover off, and I wasn't even hearing that buzzer all that loud. Yeah, immediately buzzing on power up. Oh. Remember I said need reading glasses. So that is a DS 1387. And that is like on the... I've never modified one of these before. I was going to modify one with the... there was the what was called the Reply 55 planer that was a third party from Reply for the Model 55. And it had a faster CPU. IBM was so relatively impressed with the performance for that they reproduced it as one of their own models, a Model 53 SLC2. And that is the only PS2 that has a DS 1387. And there is no modern substitute for a 1387. So I didn't look as close as I should have. And no harm, no foul. The 1387 just has more non-volatile RAM than does the DS 1287. And it's effectively the same pinout, just has some more I'm leaving the camera rolling here and everything else, but looks very similar. So what I want to try and do, even though this 1387 is probably, I mean, I should have tried that in the first place with firing up the system to see what messages it would tell me. And it's interesting enough, too, on the 1387s, the reason I haven't modified that chip yet is that I'm going to go through and I'm going to seat the drives, but I'm not going to put those clips back in place. This is going to be a hell long video, I guess, again. Warts and all. And, but it'll give me a chance. But as I was saying, on the my Model 53s and everything else, granted I haven't fired them up recently, but years ago, they seemed like they still had a good charge to them. And that I hadn't needed to replace one yet, or modify one yet. Okay, with the 1387 in there, we're going to go ahead and okay, no warning beeps. I don't expect this thing is going to go all the way to be able to configure, but we have video in this case now that we have the right real-time clock chip in place. I should be paying attention to, okay, so sounds like the 16 megabyte, like I thought. I even wonder if maybe this clock chip had a, I mean, it did give us a warning about the time and date. Okay, NCR setup utility. And I didn't even see that spin up the diskette drive, so maybe that's, well, it is now. Get out of the way. It's finally spun up the drive, but it launched that. Apparently, it's a little bit more in BIOS or something to that effect. Any key to continue. Okay, and we get to see kind of this. Okay, there's your time and date. Okay, let's look at that first. This has got to journey down the rabbit hole. File copy. And that's probably for the ADFs and your option diskettes. There's your automatic configuration. And notice it didn't even say anything about configuration. And maybe that's a process a little bit once you have an adapter in there or something. And I'm let's move me a little bit out of the way here. How that shows. I wasn't masking much, but a restore. Okay. Escape to exit probably. I'm going to just go through, let's look at utilities. Date and time, backup disk, passwords, keyboard speed. So let's just do, and look at that. I haven't even touched this system, and that date, it thinks it's 8 in the morning instead of 8 o'clock at night. So that's about 12 hours off, really. I'm able to go through, and it's actually 8:47 here. And I wonder if that time and date thing was just because we had that Dallas 1287 modules in there instead of the correct one. So do we... How do we... Okay, I'm thinking just escape to exit, but we'll probably have to eject the... go on all the way in the top corner. Probably have to eject. It's a good idea to maybe eject that reference diskette. So we didn't even need one for all that. I didn't have to come up with a reference diskette. Should have just powered it up. Shouldn't you guys inside? Press escape again. You will leave setup. Well, that's fine. And I have my mouse up here too. So, okay, so we just have a... wanted to boot from the C diskette. So... MS-DOS version 5. I'm just going to do a Control-Delete for a reboot. It acted like we thought we were still wanting to work with the A drive. And test all the devices that built in BIOS. Not really using a diagnostic diskette or anything like that to... And then press... Why is it saying press F1 though? Oh, time and date not set. So even despite that, we got through it. So most likely that battery is thought of the drainers. Not. It'd be interesting to see what time and date it thinks now that I went through and set it, but it's flagging that as just not enough charge or something else on that on that 13A7 chip. So I'm gonna have to either I'll have to modify or something else on that, being how I and just looks like the standard. I don't know if I want to really this will, well, new user. That's who it's licensed to. But just looks like a pretty standard DOS 5 with Windows 3.1. But this will be a good, it's got that 46 DX4 100. And so it's probably a pretty peppy machine. Probably got good video. I thought about with the SCSI drive and all that. So it looks like we have all the correct display drivers. I mean, and this could have a I could go through and install a network adapter, and with that CPU power, even though the microchannel slots are all 16-bit, so I can't use the 32-bit adapter, but might be interested enough just being a good development system. Load something like Visual Basic for Windows, maybe even the Visual Basic for DOS. Yeah, it's got the QBasic, and that might even be good to play around with that as far as to seeing anything about extended CMOS, or see how close they paralleled IBM and kind of the microchannel aspects. For setting up the adapter and planar resources, it's probably all the same, but that might be interesting to run everything on that. And of course, here in Windows, we're doing ultimately that virtualized RAM. Kind of swap file stuff as it does. But it's got a good amount of RAM on it for the CPU as well. So, not really anything. I could go through and play solitaire just to see the speed of the video. And I think it's probably pretty good, capable of quite a bit there on the video regard. Let's just do another DOS, Windows, whatever the support directory means. But I've, who knew? I was so wrong about the, that real-time clock, and then ended up flubbing and putting in the wrong chip. I'm lucky I didn't. I'm lucky they're compatible enough. I was had to find a way to get it. In fact, let's go through. What time does it think it is now? Okay, so that went through and reset to like a midnight. Although it kept the date. That's decent enough. I can work with that, and it runs the date. I'll have to find out how I'd have to keep it on overnight to have it update the date, maybe, or I'll have to see if that rolls around. Maybe fire it up tomorrow and see how that is. But well, we learn things. So that support directory looks like it works with the built-in planar display features, the video chip and VRAM and all that's on the planar for this model, of going through and setting up the display certain ways, high resolution modes, things like that. But learning experience for me as well, and who knew that all I had to do is pull this machine out and connect it up. And I thought about doing that, but I got in the big old thing of trying to track down the reference diskette and everything else for it. And I mean, that's a good measure too, because it gave me exposure to that reference diskette creation. And undoubtedly I'll encounter that for the other machine I have here. And of course I'm going to do that another time. I didn't form up a reference diskette for it tonight. I wanted to show off the model that I didn't open up inside and everything as of yet. And maybe this will push me to eventually modify one of those DS1387 chips. So, again, a lot of off-the-wall content. Went through, looks like about 55 minutes of video. But it was good looking at. So, if you like this content, click on that like button. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That's all I have for now. This is IBM Museum. Thank you.